Good morning. I'm Richard Rukuma. I'm a 63-year-old developer with 40 years development experience. And today I want to talk about coding agents and changing from a coding agent to an AI harness. When most of us first started to use LLMs, we used them inside of development tools, and they showed up in familiar places like Visual Studio and JetBrains. And at first, the model was just a chatbot inside the inside the IDE. It then became a coding agent, and it helped us write functions. It explained errors. It generated tests and move inside the traditional, and allowed us to move much faster inside the traditional development workflow to the point where it allowed us to iterate very quickly. That was the first major shift. But this was still an IDE or a tech first environment for people to use and interact with a coding agent inside of a development environment. That LLM was a capability inside the tool. And what's happening now is much, much bigger. We're moving to an AI assisted IDE to an agentic centric workflow. And the whole experience is moving into a new environment. And we call that the AI harness. What that matters is because this is a tool that is no longer just a better coding tool. It's a different kind of IDE for a different kind of work. And when I say knowledge worker, I mean someone who works through the intent, the specification, the planning, the execution, and not someone who just uses information. I'm a cloud solution architect, and that means I use the IDE in 3 stages. First, I explore and define specifications. Second, I use it to build a plan. And third, to actually create the application. So in this context, the IDE is not just for writing code. It becomes a place to shape understanding before software is built. And that's what makes an AI harness so different. It's not just supporting development. It's supporting the workflow of thought and work itself. And makes this even more interesting is that it's the same AI harness, but used in 2 totally different ways. The first flavor is software centric. And here the AI harness helps me do what I do, build the specification and create the software. The second flavor is workflow centric. And this is where things get scary. Here the AI harness becomes the host for what I call agentic workflows. Agents are created, tasks are executed, and operational work is carried out. So the harness is doing 2 very different jobs. In one case, it helps build an application. It writes the software. And in the other, it creates a workflow that performs a task. How it performs that task is agentically, meaning that the agent is not code, it's text. And that distinction matters because both depend on what I call a host. Now, an application, once it's built, runs in its own domain, its own host. Every web application you run uses a web host. Where that host is another matter, but let's not get into that. What I'm talking about is when we build agents and skills and similar things like that to perform tasks, the AI harness is itself the host. So Codex is the host or Claude is the host. This is where real strategic issue appears. In that if the organization uses AI to build the software, it may become dependent on the software it writes. In fact, that happens all the time. But if the knowledge worker uses the AI harness to host agentic workflows, then it becomes a host itself. And on that platform, it executes those workflows. And that is a very different kind of dependency. For reliability, for scale, and for cost, In the IR harness, the currency is tokens, and tokens represent reasoning, context, inference, and execution. That means the operational cost of using the harness is not the same as traditional cloud compute. And it's not the same as simple software licensing either. So the question is not just, can the model generate output? The question is, what kind of a dependency are we creating? And what will that dependency cost us to sustain? Today, both IT workers and business users are using the same AI harness, which is amazing unto itself. That's never happened. But for vastly different artifacts. For IT, for me, the output is specifications, plans, application logic, and finally software. For the business users, the output might be workflows and decisions and agentic processes and operational outcomes. The AI harness is used for both. Why? Because we interact with it agentically. And what do I mean by that? Is that the interface that we're using is just our words. Whether we type them or speak them, it's just words that we're giving to the LLM. That's when the LLM uses to handle the inquiry, and that's what makes it so powerful and so different from traditional IDEs. So when you look at the evolution of large language models, I don't see a move from coding agent to knowledge worker. I see a shift from the traditional IDE like Visual Studio or JetBrains to a chatbot coding agent to an agentic-centric AI harness. And within that harness, there are two flavors. One for building applications, specification and plans, and one for hosting agentic workflows and executing work. That's the transition that matters most. Not just what the model can do, but what the IDE has become, where dependency lives, and how the cost of work is changing. Thank you, and we'll see you another day. Take care.